This is Maryland Comptroller Peter Francho, and you are listening to the Maryland Crabs.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
And with us today, we've got, let's see if I can do this without screwing it up, but Natanya Levioff.
Bonus points. Bonus points. You got them both.
We're going to call you Sue.
That's actually my aunt's name.
all the letters just they confuse me for some reason. Look, it says Natanya Levioff. It's just the vowels run into each other and everything else.
And then once you pronounce it, it totally makes sense.
It does. It really does. So. But Natanya is with the Travis Manion Foundation. Are you an employee at them?
No, I'm a volunteer.
You're a volunteer.
Volunteer.
And you are double dipping, and you've also got the title of race director for the 9/11 Heroes Run
for Annapolis,
which we're going to talk a little bit about. But for those that don't know Travis Manion, or of him, he is a Naval Academy graduate that unfortunately was killed in action, and his family had started a foundation in his name to really let him live on. Tell us a little bit about Travis, because you did know him. You were working or volunteering for the Naval Academy and with the wrestling team.
Correct.
You were like the wrestling mom.
Well, I am now.
Okay.
Back then,
Okay.
I consider
like
myself more the big sister.
Back
when Travis was coming
through. We all get a little bit older.
Now I'm mom.
God, it's horrible. So you were working with the wrestling team.
Correct.
Back when Travis was a mid.
Correct.
Okay.
So I am the public address announcer for Navy Wrestling. So if you ever go to a sporting event and you have, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your team and the standing up for national anthem, all that kind of arena announcing, that's what I do for Navy Wrestling. So I got to announce for Travis all 4 years that or 3 of the 4 years that he competed for.
Okay, so you came in during his third class year.
Well, I was actually there from the beginning. I've been involved with Navy Wrestling since 94, 95, and had been announcing since 2000.
You were drafted, weren't you?
That's maybe an interesting way to put it.
They're short someone on the timekeeper or something like that?
So, well, actually, I started out doing books, so keeping the stats for them, and I was told by Reggie Wicks, the coach at the time, who I called when I moved here after graduating from Syracuse. I'd fallen in love with the sport, didn't want to walk away. Syracuse and Navy were in the same division, which is how I got to know the team and the coach. And that first match when I did the books, he said he hadn't been able to read stats that clearly in a couple of years. And then eventually the staff member who was doing announcing for the team decided he'd had enough, and I stepped into the announcer role in 2000. So that was my connection with
I'm going to
Navy
show my ignorance.
That's quite all right.
Where does Navy Wrestling compete? Alumni Hall?
Well, they do both, mostly in Alumni Hall. Sometimes we're in Wesley Brown Fieldhouse now if we do a tournament and we need more mats than can go on the floor at Alumni. So we used to be in Halsey way back when.
Okay.
Before that became an indoor field facility. That just shows how long I've been with the Naval Academy, and maybe I'm dating myself now, so I should probably back off that level of memory.
Get out while you're ahead.
Get out while I'm ahead.
But back to Travis. Okay,
Yeah.
so what? Tell us about his time at the academy and where he went and what happened, and tell us the story.
So as far as Travis goes, and I think any young person who decided to go to a service academy post 9/11, especially the ones who would go Marine Corps through the Naval Academy and those who went to West Point and were going straight into infantry for Army, they knew where they were going when they graduated. I mean, you were going to Iraq during that period of time, especially in 2004. And so...
It was during the surge. Well,
during
it was pre-surge.
Pre-surge and then through. And so Travis was following in the footstep of his father, Thomas Manion, who was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. So I think as far as Travis was concerned, it was going to be Marine Corps all the way.
Hoorah.
For him. Hoorah. Not that we don't love our Navy guys as well,
of
course.
My father was a jarhead for World War II. He lied about his age to enlist in World War II and went out into the Pacific and fought. And I've got utmost respect for Marines.
So Travis was recruited actually by the Naval Academy to wrestle. He was actually a 2 or 3 sport athlete when he was in high school in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, wrestling and lacrosse.
Do you know where he went to school?
Not off the top of my head.
Would you remember it if it were CB West or CB East, Central Bucks East? Or those were the two big public
literally
high schools.
just had this conversation at an event at Travis Manion, and I want to say West, but I don't want anybody to tweak me just in case it was the East. So actually, Travis's senior year, he was nationally ranked at that point coming into the season for wrestling and wound up having the term would be catastrophic shoulder injury that really basically ended his wrestling career at the Naval Academy, but was still engaged with the team and was actually called upon for the Army-Navy wrestling match, which would be his last official dual meet as a Navy wrestler. And that was actually being hosted by Navy that year. So we had our senior ceremony. And Travis was really good. He competed at 184 pounds and
That's big. For
yeah,
wrestling.
well, that's what he got down to. So normal weight wise, Travis was up there above 200. So he was cutting weight down to be at 184.
Yeah,
so he was an upper weight guy. Yeah.
I'm 200 pounds, but I'm
running the steps.
Yeah, well, I can't do that anymore in wrestling. That would be way, way, way back, which again, I'm not going down that memory lane to date myself.
I didn't think wrestlers got that big. I always thought them as kind of little wiry guys.
Yeah, no. They get that big. They get bigger than that, actually. Heavyweight, so up to 275 is the,
I thought that was like
the bigger
sumo.
end of things at the collegiate level. And I actually just learned this story a couple of weeks ago, thanks to Ryan Manion, his sister, who was doing a presentation to the summer seminar students at the academy. And Travis had beaten the kid at that weight from Army the year before at West Point. And so the opposite team, Army knew that Travis was hurt and didn't think he was going to be in the lineup. And coach came to him and said, look, I got to get you in the lineup just to have a little fun here on the other side of the mat, right? And get them a little scrambled. And that's, strategy is a part of anything, not just in sports. But that meant, because Travis hadn't really been wrestling that year because of his injury, in order to be in the lineup, unlike other sports, you have to weigh in wrestling. And you have to weigh in boxing because you're at certain weights.
Right,
so it's not just a question of, we'll just put you in there just to show. It was, you literally have to make weight and weigh in order to officially be in the lineup for that event. So he, was up there above 200 because he hadn't been competing, and he had a week to drop that weight, and he cut down to 184, knowing he wasn't going to wrestle, to help the team out. And when the other side saw him in the lineup, when I got to announce him coming out at 184 with the other one who would actually be wrestling, it really kind of scrambled them, because at that point all their guys had weighed in. So it's not like you could have put someone else in there to mix things around. And we actually won that Army-Navy match that year. And so Travis, I think, in his own way, had a part in that win. And of course, beating Army is a very big deal around here. So
in wrestling, how does that work? Does that, if you may have 2 people, 184 or 4 people or whatever it is, and then the coach?
Usually it's 2, and they can make a game.
Then the coach,
game day, call an
decision.
audible decision of which one.
Didn't you ever watch Vision Quest? That was the whole thing. Matthew Modine?
No.
Very famous movie in the wrestling circles.
I think he's the only one, right? It's got to be. It's a great movie.
Okay. Now I'm learning something new.
Linda Fiorentino? Jeez, you got to see that movie.
Yeah, I know. I'll get out of my shelter. Get out of my...
Great big Madonna song in that one, too. One of her top hits.
So, Travis...
We're thinking.
Now that I've said that.
All right. This off-topic
Is it
moment brought to you by...
No, all right, we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that one. We'll figure it out. Gotta know this stuff, right? Trivia.
I should know this. That's... All right. No,
anyway.
Everyone just drifted off thinking...
Let me know when you guys are done.
Tangent.
That's Who's That Girl?
All right, so Travis is wrestling. He didn't win. He didn't wrestle, but he played.
Senior year.
Or he was at the match.
It was at the match. Yes, you don't play wrestling.
Yeah,
It was a
I know.
famous
Come on, John,
quote
this is
from
embarrassing.
Freaked out Army.
Freaked Out Army helped us
Helped the team win
the day. That's correct.
And that was his senior year.
And that was his senior and final year at the academy. And he would go on to be a Marine and get commissioned on commissioning day as a second lieutenant, and went through TBS, or the basic school, down at Quantico, Virginia. And he went infantry. So he was going to be boots on the ground and leading a group of Marines, and again, following in the footsteps of his father.
And then he was deployed.
So his first time out, he was more in a support capacity and helping out more from the back side of the line.
Is that a typical thing on a new deployment? first, or somebody's first deployment, that they first come in to sort of, I want to say, in a support role where they, for lack of a better word, get a taste of what it might be before they would put somebody out on the front lines?
That's actually a very interesting question. I don't have an answer for that. I don't work for the United States Marine Corps. I think a lot of it also has to do with what your specialized part is and your skill set. And so
I do know he trained in the Mojave Desert because it gets like 120 degrees out
Yes, he was
there.
based out of Camp Pendleton. That's
crazy.
correct. And that's, good training ground, if I can call it
And I'm
that,
all whiny because this room that we do our podcast in is always freezing. So I wouldn't do well in the Mojave. I just don't like it either too hot or too cold. Anyway, you were saying?
So he wasn't on the front lines in that first deployment and didn't feel like he was doing his part in a very small way. Travis was certainly one to set an example and lead from the front. When you met him, he was one of those people that had a quiet leadership aura about him, so you would know he was in the room, and he wasn't the loudest person in the room and didn't necessarily look for the attention, but
you know who's in control.
You knew who was there, and you knew when he was around, and that's one of the things that caught my own attention about him. So I think he probably didn't feel like he was really giving what he should in that first deployment, and so when he went back for what would be his second and final deployment, he was with a group that was helping train Iraqi Army members in several different things and was out there in front with his unit going on patrols and had boots on the ground. And that was really what Travis wanted to do in terms of his service with the Marine Corps.
What happened? What are the circumstances surrounding, when he died?
That day. So he was killed in action on April 29th, 2007. And he was actually not supposed to be on patrol that day. He was actually going to get to do a humanitarian event and go out with a couple of Marines to help give school supplies. So part of all the roles when we have boots on the ground overseas, it's not just about combat or training.
Right, it's rebuilding.
It's rebuilding.
Sure.
It's building that trust in the community. And certainly anything dealing with kids in schools is always a good avenue to build that community trust. And so he was supposed to do some humanitarian work that day. And he had one of the lieutenants come in from his unit that morning and said to him, I'm just not in a good headspace to go out. And I don't know what to do because that's what I'm supposed to do today. And Travis said, no problem. You take my spot. I was going to give school supplies and help be a part of this humanitarian group today. I'll take your patrol. And went out, and the unit came under fire. And 3 different times, Travis exposed himself to either pull to safety or allow wounded members of his unit to get to safety. And that third and final time, when it looked like there was no hope in terms of people closing in, he exposed himself again, and the unit was able to move to a place of safety. And at that point, he was shot by a sniper. And that's when he was killed in the field. And he was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for his bravery. So his entire unit got out except for him that day.
How many are in a unit, do you know?
Again, good question, and I also think it depends on the actual work that's being done and what the task is at hand.
But
absolutely,
I'm 6, 7,
at least somewhere in there. I would guess.
And this was in a remote area, or was it a?
He was in Fallujah.
Okay.
So I believe, again, I would have to double check
Right.
that, but certainly out there, again, you're in the patrol vehicles, you're in the Humvees, you're on the road, depending on what's going on any given day. At that point in time in 2007, you were opening yourself up to a possibility when you went out on patrol that something was going to happen.
Is he buried in Doylestown, or is he in Arlington?
So he was originally buried in Doylestown.
Okay.
And he was then moved to Arlington. And that happened in 2010 when his roommate from the academy, Brendan Looney, who was a star lacrosse player, Navy SEAL. Mm-hmm. So when Travis passed away, Brendan was actually in the middle of his SEAL training, the first school of that being known as BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition School. And he pushed through to finish, so he couldn't attend the funeral in Doylestown because he was in the middle of training, and pushed through and dedicated the rest of his training to Travis. He wound up being honor man out of that class, which is the number 1 graduate out of the BUDS classes. So when Brendan died in a helicopter accident in Afghanistan.
Looney, right?
This was Brendan Looney, correct. And he helped lead the Navy lacrosse team to the finals. Against Syracuse, I might add. So that I figured I was going to win either way, no matter who was going to win that year. And the decision by both families at that point was they wanted them buried together in Arlington. And that's actually a pretty hard thing to do, let alone being buried in Arlington. There's a whole process that you have to go through. And so they were able to make that
There's some brass that got
happen.
involved with that.
There was a lot of people, I think, who got involved with that. And so the fact that both of them, they were roommates at the Academy in life, and now they would be roommates at Arlington, was the driving force behind having them buried. So we moved Travis, and he was reinterred on a Saturday, and then Brendan was interred next to him the next day on a Sunday. So it was a very powerful weekend, to say the least.
In memory of their son, the Manions started a foundation.
That's correct.
And this was done in
2007, the year he passed. It was after the funeral and donations. People were just sending money in, and
this is what just we're sorry about your.
I think sorry about your loss. Just do
you need money to help offset cost? I mean,
half a dozen. Right. Anytime anybody passes and you see the whole in lieu of a donation,
right.
please donate to a cause. Again, just things started pouring in, and all of a sudden, Janet's looking at this like, this is some serious money. And so they started the foundation in 2007, named it after Travis, and originally started out by helping give money to other organizations that were serving veterans, and thought maybe we would just help other people do good work for the veteran community.
You cut a check to the Wounded Warrior Project, and maybe not them, but
maybe not then. I don't even know if they were
or
launched
around.
back then, actually, or around. But
they've had their problems.
Other groups.
Just somebody I know locally here. We've got Warrior Events, which does some good work with John O'Leary's group and everything else. So what does the foundation do now at this point?
So the mission of the foundation, and it's grown and evolved right over time. You figure out who you are or what. So it's really nationwide, and has really come on. There's
chapters everywhere, and the events.
Offices everywhere. We've got. I know we'll get about the run in a minute, but there's over 50 runs across the country now, and there's regional offices. So it's really been amazing to watch the growth of this over the 10-year span so far. So really the mission now for the Travis Manion Foundation is to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to instill character and develop character in future generations to strengthen American communities. Travis, at the core of who he was as a person, was about character. He was about doing the right thing, even if it wasn't the popular thing to do, even if nobody was watching. That was really who Travis was, and this notion about character was the legacy that the family wanted to carry on.
And even the tagline, "If not me, then who?" Where did that come from?
There's a huge story behind that one, yeah. So just before his second and what would be his final deployment, he'd only gotten home, I think, about a month or two before, when he found out he was going to quickly have to turn around and go back.
So he only had a month or
a month or two, and he was still in Pendleton. So he'd come home he was going to get to have holidays with the family in December, get a week or two.
At that point, I think they were having shorter
turnaround times between deployments.
Then colleges have summer breaks.
That's actually nuts. That's how fast people were getting turned around. So when you hear stories about people who've gone on 3 and 4 and 5 deployments, especially back then, if you were lucky, you had a month.
And a deployment is 6 months?
Again, it depends. It can be 6, 9, a year. Again, it all depends on where you get based and what your area of specialization is. So during that time when he was back on the East Coast and being able to have holidays with the families, he made a trip up to New York City, and he visited Rescue 1, which is the New York Fire Department station that's known for losing the one house that lost almost every single member on 9/11. He went through a tour of the house and got to meet all of the firefighters and the guys and the gals in that house. And they ended up giving him a hat, a Rescue 1 hat that also said "Never Forget" on 9/11, that he ended up giving to his father when he came home from that visit. And here the NY Fire Department guys and gals were thanking him for his service as a Marine. And you have to remember, Travis graduated in 2004. This visit took place at the end of 2006, so it's not like he'd been a Marine very long, and he couldn't understand. Coming in there with all the right, he's a second lieutenant, and he's sitting there just amazed. As a kid, here were these this house that lost almost all of its members on 9/11, and they were thanking him. And he really came home with a genuine understanding and even a greater passion of why he was doing what he was doing in Iraq. And that's what he carried with him when he went to that second deployment. So as part of that holiday season, being from Philadelphia, went to a Philadelphia Eagles game with his brother-in-law. And, on any given Sunday in an NFL stadium, you're talking about, especially in Philadelphia, pretty, raucous and festive kind of event.
That's a nice way to put the Philly crowd.
Well, no, I'm from
Raucous,
Philly, so...
Well, I don't want you to knife me.
I'm going to defend my folks. Having a great time at the tailgate. They walk in to get to the game, and they're walking to their seats when the national anthem starts, and Travis just stops dead in his tracks and stands at attention for the national anthem, and his brother-in-law is watching this happen. And great time at the game, and it was against the New York Giants, I believe. And, anybody who knows that game knows that's as almost important as Army-Navy, except when Dallas is in town. And Eagles pulled out the win. And this was really only about a week before Travis was deploying again. And so as they're leaving, his brother-in-law, they come up to the steps, and he said, "Hey, Travis, what happened if, I kind of pushed you down and you broke an ankle or an elbow or something, and you wouldn't have to go back?" Joking, but not joking, right, at the same time. And again, NFL game, Sunday, Eagles won, you can imagine, everybody, beer or two or three or four, depending, around him. And Travis stopped and got very, very serious and looked at his brother-in-law and said, "Look, if I don't go, someone who doesn't have the training that I do, someone who hasn't been over there already and has an understanding of what they're walking into, someone less prepared than I am is going to go. If not me, then who?"
Wow.
And that's how that tagline came to be, and that's the story of how that started. And it ties in, I think, very nicely with the work that the foundation is doing about this notion about instilling character in our young people. If you don't step up and do the right thing, or if you don't step up and do something in service to someone else, then who is? And that's the challenge that we lay out.
Those 5 words have really sort of defined his life.
Absolutely. And again, getting to see Ryan present the Character Does Matter presentation at summer seminar at the Naval Academy, one of the most powerful things that I got out of what she said when she gives this presentation, and she's now the president of the foundation, is she said when her husband told her that story, she understood and he understood in that moment that it wasn't just about that particular moment and his service in the Marine Corps, that truly that phrase really signified how Travis lived his entire life.
Obviously, I've heard the phrase before, and I saw it. I walk by the Eastport Fire Department a bunch of times, and there's a bench out front that I noticed. And what is the story? I mean, it's not just surreptitious that they just happen to come up with the same 5 words. I'm thinking. Right. How did that come to be about? Because that's it's a very nice little area. It's a very peaceful area. When I walk by it, I like it.
Well, if we've got any Annapolis Fire Department folks listening, I know that you've just given them the highest compliment, because that's exactly what they envisioned that memorial garden being. So Janet, Travis's mom, who started the foundation.
Travis wasn't married, was he?
No, he was not.
Okay.
No, he was not. So she had started the foundation, again, as a way to channel grief, as many families of fallen heroes or just fallen individuals, period, right, do. And unfortunately, we lost her to cancer just a couple days shy of the 5th anniversary of when Travis passed. So that last week in April, for those of us, for the family, but then also those of us who were lucky enough to know both Travis and Janet, is a pretty rough time every year, like myself. And through the run, we had partnered for a couple of years with the Annapolis Fire Department as our community benefactor. Now we ensure all of our proceeds go to the programs of the Travis Manion Foundation. But for a couple of years, the Annapolis Fire Department was a beneficiary, and a portion of the money that we raised for the run went to them and their programs.
Okay.
For the firemen, for the
pay
families,
them back, if you will, for their assistance and everything else.
Way to say thank you, support support certain kinds of programs that they wanted to do, but may not have had the funds to do it. And so that last year that we were partnered with them, they wanted to do something in honor of Janet, and they decided they wanted to do a small memorial garden and have a place where folks could reflect and think about this message of if not me, then who? And so that's how that memorial garden and that bench came to be.
Is Travis's father still alive?
Tom is still alive, so it's Tom and Ryan together carrying on, both, and I think not just for Travis, but also for his mom, Janet.
And is I'm presuming that he's on the board of the foundation, and
he's the chairman emeritus, I believe, of the board in terms of an official title.
Right.
So.
How big has this foundation grown from at this point? And I know Tim had mentioned earlier that there's chapters all over, and we've had runs all over.
Yeah,
we're going to get to that. I mean, how big is this? I mean, and I imagine a lot of them are volunteers such as you are.
More than 4,000.
4,000 volunteers, yeah, across the country for sure.
I had a website.
So, see,
I'm cheating.
He's cheating.
Everyone's just staring at me. How do you know that? Right?
He's probably double checking everything I'm saying because I don't have my computer.
I'm just
guessing. Wrong. You weren't born in 19.
Hey, watch that.
I'm just guessing that it serves 60,000 or more veterans and survivors. I'm just guessing that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're actually going to start moving to actually a chapter kind of set up, and there'll be more information rolling out on the website about that. But right now, there's about 7 or 8 regional offices. DC. We do have a regional office out of DC now, so that's great for those of us who are here in the Mid-Atlantic area. And it's really grown from this very 5-person and 10 volunteer kind of operation in Doylestown, which is where our headquarters still resides, and that's where Ryan and Tom live, to what is now again 8 regional offices and moving towards chapters and just more and more people every day, or it's a pretty, I think, easy message and notion to grab onto, this notion of doing the right thing, especially when no one's looking.
You have a lot of services for veterans, like transitional services, I think.
So there's 4 main channels that the foundation works in, and then there's 5 programs that both go deep in those channels, but also are connected and work across. And so we work with the veteran community, we work with the families of fallen heroes, survivors. We work with youth, and then we work with community. So for veterans, we help them in their time when they're thinking about transitioning out of the military. And there's a lot of folks doing a lot of great work around that, and there's a lot of support that's needed for veterans who are transitioning. And you've got folks out there who are doing everything from helping them craft their resumes to mock interviews to the job fairs. And where the Travis Manion Foundation comes in is actually before that, and helping transitioning folks think about and understand what are my strengths and how do I present myself and help figure out what's my next step in the civilian world. And it's a very niche part of what the veteran transition kind of
So the
area
foundation itself is actually working hands-on with veterans and families.
Yes.
As opposed to, I know, like we've spoken with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, who is essentially a funding organization.
Correct.
And you do both?
So now, actually, we've transitioned from what would be a funding foundation, which is where we started 10 years ago, and now we are, I would say, programming and advocacy as a foundation. So working with veterans specifically around transitioning, but also ensuring that they feel they have a sense of purpose in their community, and that's where our Character Does Matter program comes in, and working with youth, not just around character, but around leadership. So it gives veterans an opportunity to take all their experiences and connect with young people, some of whom may have no connection to folks who have served this country, and that gap is starting to become wider and wider. So that's also a great opportunity there.
Which is strange when you think about it, because I was a kid. My father was drafted into the Army around Vietnam, and at the time I knew a lot of people who were, I was a little kid at the time, but you had that connection with people who were coming back or who were at least drafted. But in the last, so we invaded in 2003, so it's been 14 years, and I think the military services, all 4 or 5, are ubiquitous. Like they're in all the commercials you see, and we support troops. And there's been such a rally for the last almost 2 decades on this that it would be kind of weird that there's that gap that's kind of occurring, because it's normalized now. And
that may be the case, and interesting that you bring up.
People don't think about it anymore.
Well, we're not drafted, right? So there's a very different scenario there.
Well, but I mean, if you're a kid in high school right now, you were born around the time when we invaded. So we've always been at war. We've always been in 2 wars since kids are born. So that's normal for them. For us, we grew up during the Cold War, where we were terrified of the
potential, but there weren't boots on the ground somewhere. Yeah, very different.
We had little things. We had Grenada, and we had Beirut, which wasn't a little thing. But I mean, we had all. But it was shocking to us. Whereas now they don't keep track of how many troops are dying overseas anymore. There's nothing. And maybe adults have been desensitized too, because we've just been at war for so long that people are no longer weary. It's just part of life, like the police and the firefighters and soldiers. They're all just doing their job, and maybe people just have ceased kind of appreciating the danger and the sacrifice that go into it.
Well, and that's one of the biggest reasons the run was started. And again, I know we're gonna get there, so I don't want to steal that segment thunder here. But again, I think
we don't have any rules.
I like that. No rules. It's a good thing.
Well, it's a lazy thing. We'd have to write them down and then
just check them off, and then make sure you're following them. But I think, and interestingly, in a conversation I had recently, we were talking about how when the Vietnam veterans were coming back, and all of the controversy around that particular war. They weren't even thanked, right, for their service. And service members were almost looked down upon, and it was a totally different, world back then. And so when you think about now, you have civilians who are trying to find a way to connect with service members, and sometimes, saying thank you for your support is the only way civilians, like myself, know how to even start the conversation. And it may sound trite, right, to the ears of a service member, but it's also the civilian's way, I think, of trying to connect. And that's also something that the foundation is looking at in terms of how to foster that sense of community with those, and not just military.
In World War I, World War II.
Yeah,
you saw that.
So you look at the differences between now and the Vietnam War, and at least folks are aware and thankful for the service, but there's so much more behind all of that, I think, and that's part of also what the foundation's trying to
question for you is, and
promote.
Anymore, there's a lot of foundations and organizations that, hey, we're doing it for the troops. We're doing it. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's a lot of them that are shams. And, Wounded Warrior, I mentioned them earlier. I mean, they had their share of problems in the last couple of years as to whether they're doing actually any good or whether it's just a front for, not a total front, but the parties and travel and everything else. Do you find the proliferation of these, organizations are hurting you?
So I'm going to answer that as Natanya Levioff, resident of Annapolis and not a representative of the Travis Manion Foundation. So first I can say that there are over 44,000 different organizations doing work for veterans across the country.
Absurd.
If you want the number, actually.
That's an absurd
Which is
number.
an absurd number when you think about it, but at the same time, and everybody's doing different pieces, right? There's a lot of pieces involved with how to support not just the veteran community, but also folks who are still active and military families too. So I think you really look at that number. You're talking about veterans and potentially even military family kind of support services, and everybody's doing lots of different things. And I know there's several initiatives underway to start to get the Veteran Service Organization community, or VSOs, to really start collaborating and talking and ensure that everybody is really kind of rowing in the same direction when it comes to supporting veterans. And I think when you're talking about quality, I mean, obviously, I think in anything, quality is always going to bubble up to the top, and you're going to know who the quality folks are. And I think one of the other fabulous things that's been wonderful to see with the Travis Manion Foundation is to see them really take hold and take root, and they're really starting to stand out as one of the quality organizations.
So the growth really sort of speaks to the quality too, and that it started out as contributions to a family in their time of sorrow into, as Tim says, an organization with more than 4,000 volunteers in different chapters.
Says so on the website.
And everything
cheating,
else that's going over.
Yeah, well, one of the programs, and I'm glad that you mentioned that in terms of what we do for families of the fallen, we have what we call survivor expeditions, and it's fully paid for, and we take families of the fallen, and recently we actually took a bunch of young people out to Oregon for a week for a teen expedition, and you're bringing together families that have a unfortunately shared, right, experience with losing a fallen service member, and give them a project to do in honor of and in memory of their fallen family member. And so, for example, we recently, several months ago, brought a group to Guatemala, and they were in a village somewhere in Guatemala, and they built a home for a family that didn't have one. And you had about 20 family members who were coming together with that shared experience of loss, but also coming together to build something in service to a family in need and in remembrance of their lost one. And so that's part
fantastic.
of the work we do with families. And again, we just had a teen expedition, brought 20 kids who had never met each other before, but had lost a parent or a brother or a sister. And they were out in Oregon for a week, and they were riding horses and doing some other kinds of projects to kind of take that grief and kind of channel it and have a shared understanding and be around people who get it, come out of it, stronger for having had that experience.
How does somebody help out or get involved with Travis Manion Foundation? I mean, do we all have to go to like the wrestling coach and see if we can get into the scorekeeper or something? I mean, how does I
don't know how Coach Sherritt would feel about me
if
putting that
Bill
out
Gates
there.
or Steve Bisciotti or Kevin Plank are listening, the best way to help out is a check, and it would be a big one.
We'd hope so.
But I mean, obviously, your money helps.
Money always helps, yeah.
But aside from, I mean, if they want to donate money, where do we go to donate money? Can we do that online?
Absolutely. You can do everything online at travismanion.org is the website, and you can find
MANION.
Correct. Travis Manion, all one word, .org. And really volunteering can take on several different ways. You can come volunteer for the run. Again, we'll get to that in a minute, and I'll be plugging for Annapolis. We have a nationwide community service effort that we do 1 week in November surrounding Veterans Day and 1 week in April surrounding the anniversary of when Travis passed, called Operation Legacy, and it's really designed to get the community out to rally around a needing area in the community, so you can come out and spend the day doing community service. Again, all of that's also online. And just sending in an email, just say, hey, I want to help out. I live here. What can I do in the area that I'm in? And then you'll get pointed to either a regional office or what will hopefully be chapters opening up all across the country. We can always use helping hands.
So you have chapters, so you're in the process of doing that, so it's kind of evolving, is it right now? It's a large organization. It's still evolving into something even larger at this point.
I would say yes to that. And it's, again, kind of really neat to see this growth. It means, again, people are connecting to this notion of if not me, then who, in this movement to be in service to others. And you don't have to be in the military. You don't have to be police or fire to do something for someone else in need. And there's ways to do that every single day, whether you open the door for someone or pick up a water bottle or, let somebody go ahead and let them in front of you when you're driving. I mean, all of those kinds of moments start to add up.
That's just crazy talk.
When you think about, I know, right?
Somebody in front of
just courteousness and
You're from
civility.
Philly.
I'm the last person that's
revoke
going to
your Philly
let.
card there on that
I actually let somebody in on my way here, so I figure I've done my good deed for the day.
You said the foundation is looking to go into a chapter type of an organization. I mean, are they actively looking for people to start chapters or groups? I mean, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to say the answer to that is yes. I know that they're putting the finishing touches on a guide, so it's kind of a turnkey. Here it is, folks.
Franchise.
Go forth. And again, it would all be volunteer-led, so I don't think they're quite ready to pull the curtain back on the chapter
But if that
thing,
is something
but
somebody's
it's coming.
interested in, they can get their name in.
Yes,
for sure
again,
to
absolutely.
follow up.
TravisManion.org. They can send an email and say, I'm interested in starting a chapter, and I know folks will be delighted to take down information, and then when it's ready to launch, I'm sure there'll be an email that goes out to somebody that's...
Well, I've heard there's a rumor going on that there's some kind of a race coming on. You briefly mentioned that
Rumor has it.
once or twice. I'll tell you, let's take a quick break, pay some bills, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with Natanya Levioff, and we're going to talk about the 911 Heroes Run.
Hey folks, this is Tim Hamilton, your favorite co-host of the Maryland Crabs podcast. Besides being hilarious and charming on this podcast every week, I'm also a marketing professional with clients all over the region. I buy advertising and media from my clients, including TV, cable, newspaper, magazine, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And this may surprise you, but I still buy direct mail. I know it sounds very 1978, but to be completely honest, if you have a compelling message to convey, and you do it in a creative way, direct mail is dollar for dollar one of the best advertising channels out there, especially for small businesses who don't have much in the way of a marketing or advertising budget. And if I decide to use direct mail for a project, I call Post Haste Mailing in Annapolis. I've worked with Jack Ellis, the owner of Post Haste, for almost 15 years now on countless projects, and he is, in all honesty, my number one most trusted vendor. In fact, whenever I find myself in a crisis, a sales slump, an event that looked like it was going to fall on its face, a new product launch that was pushed up a few weeks, my very first phone call is always to Jack. He always gives me the answer I need. Maybe not the answer that I want, but one that gets me out of that particular jam. I'm not kidding. He has saved my job on more than one occasion. Seriously. So what does Post Haste Mailing do? Well, they do mailings, duh. That's in the name after all. But it's Jack's decades of experience that gives you the best bang for your marketing buck. Do you want to micro-target certain customers or neighborhoods or businesses? Jack can pull a list for you that makes sure that your mailing gets into the hands of your target demographic without the advertising waste that you get with other media. That means that if you have a small budget, you can still get the results you need. And if you need printing done, Post Haste Mailing can do that too. Postcards of any size, pamphlets, variable data printing, cut sheet laser printing, and a bunch of other printing terms that I don't understand. But Jack understands them, and he knows what's best for my business and how I can get the best bang for my buck. So if you're a business owner and you've never considered direct mail, give Jack at Post Haste Mailing a call to see what he can do for you. I promise you that you will be surprised at the options you didn't know were available to your business. Who knows? Maybe someday Jack can save your job too.
And thank you for sticking around, because here is the important part of this. We're talking.
The important part was that it was Crazy for You by Madonna. That was the song.
I did have it right.
I did
See that?
so.
We did figure it out. It started me.
We're here with Natanya Levioff with the Travis Manion Foundation, and I learned an awful lot about the foundation, and thank you for enlightening me for sure. But let's talk about the 9/11 Heroes Run, which is coming up here in Annapolis as well as other places across the country. And what's that all about?
So the 9/11 Heroes Run series was actually started by Travis's uncle, Chris. And Doylestown kicked it off in 2007. And Annapolis started in 2008. So we're actually the second oldest run in the country. This will be our 9th time around here doing this run. And his uncle wanted an event to specifically remember and serve as a way to thank the heroes from 9/11 who lost their lives, and also in the war since, and not just military and veteran and our fire and police, but also civilians. All of those organizations have a lot of civilians that help support them in the work that they do. And so lots of folks lost their lives on 9/11. So to have an event where 9/11 is remembered and honor the folks, not in sadness, but to honor the bravery and to make sure that they're always remembered. We started this thing called the 9/11 Heroes Run.
So it all sort of ties in with Travis's experience in Engine Company Number 1 down in New York.
Correct.
9/11 being the catalyst that got us into the mess that we're still
kind of
we're still working on, and also remembering Travis as well.
That's correct.
And the race, I'm sure, like all races, started out as a couple people jogging around a track someplace.
You're gonna have to educate us, because we're obviously not runners. You can
Funny
just take
thing
a look.
is, neither am I, and here I lead a 5K effort. So that irony is
horrible.
I'm a walker, but I got something for walkers.
I get tired driving a 5K.
You're tired after 2 blocks.
That bridge run in Annapolis is not too bad. Not the Bay Bridge, the Eastport Bridge.
That 0.05 or whatever it is.
Even then, I got to take a nap for the rest of the day.
So for us in Annapolis, when we started in 2008, it was three laps around Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. That's always been our home for the run, and maybe had 100 people show up in 2008.
Is that 5K 3 laps around there?
I think the
close?
track itself is a mile track. So if you run around
Okay,
it
so
three
it's about 3.
times, you at least get 3 instead of the 3.14 for all of our official runners out there who know the exact distance of
they get
a
all-
5K. Some of them get very particular about about distance. And now we've grown. Last year we had over 2,000 participants, 1,500 of whom were either running or walking. Our course now is half in Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium and half in the Admiral Heights neighborhood. So we're really appreciative.
So you can tick off the neighbors too.
No, we are so incredibly appreciative of the Admiral Heights Association and their support of our
They've
run
got problems
every
with
year.
people named Travis, don't you? They fought Travis.
I have no idea what you're talking about,
They fought
John.
Travis Pastrana on the Nitro Circus.
Well, all I'm going to say is that they are highly supportive of the Annapolis 9/11 Heroes Run, and we greatly appreciate that community, whom also come out and support. And we've seen folks in that community set up their own water stations just in case you can't make the halfway point, and just be out there cheering our runners on who are running through what's a little bit hilly of a course once you're in the Admiral Heights neighborhood. So we're very thankful to them, and we're thankful to the Naval Academy Athletic Association for letting us have Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium as our home for our run. I mean, what better place to do this when you're talking about honoring and remembering folks from 9/11? We're the home of the Naval Academy, so we take that responsibility in our run rather seriously. And this run is now in over 50 locations across the country. And you also, we're also over in bases. We have it run in Bahrain every year now. We even had an
That's
aircraft
cool.
carrier do it. Sailors got together and decided they were going to do this run on their aircraft carrier. So there's been some very neat places around the world that are also involved in this run, and
Just
to bring the community out. I mean, this is about honoring and remembering. And so, yes, it's a run, but it's really about bringing the community together. And we've done something pretty special on that front here in Annapolis.
Where are the big races? I mean, obviously, I'm going to assume that Annapolis and Doylestown or suburban Philadelphia is probably
Doylestown
the two
is
largest.
large. Well, we're not the largest since we're not really a metropolitan kind of area the way Doylestown is, but we're gaining steam. So Houston runs a very large group, and we're lucky to be partnered with the police department there in Houston. San Diego is another big Navy town and big location. We've got runs that are really picking up steam in Philadelphia, which is just a short drive from Doylestown. So Philly's picking up steam. New York City. We're also launching in Baltimore this year, so we think that's going to also.
When is the Baltimore run if somebody can't
The Baltimore run, if you can't make Annapolis, I believe is on October 1st. It'll be
the
the
Annapolis
last
run is on
of it.
September
17th. That's correct. It's a Sunday afternoon.
Offhand, I'd just say that you probably have 55 plus heroes runs across the country.
Because, you don't have the website up or anything like that to double check. So just
saying. Just mind your P's and Q's.
Yeah,
It's
minding the
55
P's and
plus.
Q's.
Yeah.
Across the country.
It's a 5K and a 1 mile run. 1 mile fun and a 5K.
That's correct.
You going to expand it for the serious runners to a half or anything like that? Or is it just pretty much that's enough to handle?
I think that's enough to handle. And I think my race committee volunteers would probably want to have a word or two with me if we expanded beyond that.
Actually, my wife was, she works out a lot. I do not. So she covers the both of us. And apparently there's some sort of family thing. So you can join as a family, and she's threatened that that's what we're going to do. But I'm hoping she just forgets about it between now and then. I think it's a great organization. But I think this might be something she should do on her own.
Well, you can let her do the run, and then you can take the kids and do the 1 mile walk if you want.
A
mile. And I know that's pretty far for you too. So if you don't want to even do that much, because that's a lot, we are going to have a fabulous vendor village, and you can just come out and be a part of the day. And we've got a moon bounce and lots of fabulous and wonderful support.
I've been to
in
the after party on this. It's a good one too.
It's
do you
pretty
know
fun.
Ann Wood Murphy? She was a volunteer.
Yes,
for a
I
couple
do
of
know
years.
Ann very well. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, we were very happy when she was.
Yeah, she was
involved with us.
She
and
pestered me for.
I was about to say, we're glad that she moved. I'm like, we love Ann. We're not.
Well,
glad.
no, and I think that's also the beauty of being a volunteer, and all of us on the race committee are volunteers, and anyone who puts on a 9/11 Heroes Run across the country, it's a group of volunteers doing this, and so we also are, I think, embodying the if not me then who, and being in service and being involved in your community, and I think volunteers. Having been a long-time volunteer myself, you gravitate towards things that interest you. And, sometimes you stay for a long time and have something, and sometimes you can only give a little bit of time for a short period of time. And so I think that's also the beauty of it. So we've had lots of amazing folks over these 9 years come in and out of being a part of the committee. And even if when they've cycled off, they've at least tried to bring their families if they can't be involved in the actual lift of what it takes to put on an event like this, especially one now at the size that we're at and growing, which is very exciting for us. So, yeah.
So you're doing this with Fleet Feet Annapolis. That's
well, Fleet Feet Sports Annapolis is one of our sponsor partners, is what we like to call these folks.
Veteran owned too?
Veteran owned too. Marty's a graduate of the Naval Academy.
Scott,
so I don't know if Scott graduated, but Marty for sure did.
He's in the military, I know that.
But I don't know if he was a Navy grad, the way Marty is. So we are very thankful to them and their support. We're going to be bringing back the pre-packet pickup, so I have to do a plug for that. I know there's a lot of runners that'll be happy to hear that. So the day before our run on September 16, we'll be at Harbor Center.
Right. Their new location.
No longer in Eastport, folks, so don't go there. And they're helping sponsor our pre-packet pickup the day before, so you can come and get your bib and you can get your shirt and your packet. You can also come and still sign up that day ahead of time if you'd like.
But if you want to sign up
before
the day before, where do you go?
So again, you can go online, travismanion.org, and if you go to the 9/11 Heroes Run part of the website, you can just look up our run on the drop-down list, and then it'll take you to our page. It's a very long URL, so I'm not going to say it online here because it's kind of one of those funky ones.
www.
So just look up Annapolis on the 9/11 Heroes Run page of the travismanion.org website, and you can register.
911heroesrun.org is also another URL that
it'll probably transfer you over immediately.
And that's 911, the number.
The number 911 heroesrun.org. That's correct.
5K and a 1 mile fun run at the Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis on September 17th at 2:00. And the hashtag is hashtag 911 Heroes Run. Appropriately enough. Hey, what is the story behind the logo? I've been looking at the card with the logo, and it's obviously got it's sort of a...
Looks like an iron mask.
Well, it looks a little bit like Anonymous.
Or an iron mask.
It's got the TM for the Travis Manion. It's got his
very
initials
good,
in there.
Very good. That was something I was going to point out in case you didn't see it.
It's got like a masky looking kind of alien face thing.
Like an iron mask?
Not quite alien, but...
I mean, is there something that's...
Yeah, so Travis was actually very enamored of the Spartans and the Spartan Society. That was a culture of warriors. He lived for the movie 300, and kind of that whole Spartan mentality and warrior mentality was something that he connected to. And so when they were thinking about the logo for the foundation, this was one of the options that they came across. And so it was a combination of Travis's fascination with Spartans as a Spartan helmet, and then also combining the T and the M
I do love that whole
within the
culture
logo itself. And so that's the story behind.
It's a sharp-looking logo. I mean, and it's in the circle, so I mean, it's got a little bit of a little reminiscent of the Foo Fighters. It's a little bit reminiscent of a patch that you might see on a uniform.
Yes, that too, and it's certainly as a visual, people are starting to, again, just to show the growth of the foundation over these 10 years. People are now starting to recognize the logo and who that represents.
Well, the 9/11 Heroes Run, again, September 17th. It's a Sunday afternoon at beautiful Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis. You can register at 911, the number, heroesrun.org, or you can go to travismanion.org. travismanion.org. Learn more about the Heroes Run. Learn more about the Travis Manion Foundation, all the good they're doing. Become a volunteer extraordinaire, like Natanya Levioff from Philadelphia, even though she loses her Philadelphia card because she lets people in front of her in cars.
Depends on the day.
Probably don't even throw snowballs at Santa Claus, huh?
No, I'm not one of those.
Although she probably does have a distaste for the Dallas Cowboys.
Just a slight.
Okay, that's good.
Slight
That's good.
distaste.
That's a redeeming factor. Anybody does. But thank you very much for coming out.
Thanks for having.
It's great to learn a lot more. I learned a lot more. If you want to follow us, where do you do all that stuff, Tim?
Well, you're going to find us on Facebook. We have a page and we have a group. You can find us on Twitter. John is at Annapolis. I'm at Tim Hamilton 47, and together we're at MT Crabs Podcast. You can find us online at themarylandcrabs.com. We can send us an email at theinfo@themarylandcrabs.com. You can follow us, so you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Google Play. And then when you're on there, you can rate us and give us a nice little comment there, a really nice little comment. And then if you have any questions or suggestions, shoot us up on email, info@themarylandcrabs.com. Those are all the places you can find us, John.
That's it. And we'll see you next week.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.